Welcome back to another Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into a totally fascinating and honestly wildly popular psychological framework for dating dynamics. We're unpacking a really deep analytical breakdown from a channel called Stoic Wisdom Hub. Now look, whether you entirely agree with their premise or not, the psychology they map out in this source material is just undeniably compelling. So we're going to neutrally deconstruct what they call stoic attraction, a whole system built on emotional mastery, pacing, and grounded presence. We've got a lot of interesting ground to cover, so let's get into it. Okay, let's jump right in, because the source kicks things off with a really bold claim. According to their framework, the standard dating advice society feeds us, it's completely broken. The original material explicitly claims women aren't wired to obsess over men who act like servants. The central argument here is that overpraising, overinvesting, and basically begging for attention literally repels the exact people you're trying to attract. So it naturally begs the question, right? Why exactly does predictable behavior kill attraction? Well, the source identifies a massive issue in modern courtship. That dynamic where one person is just way too overinvested. They put all their cards on the table on day one. According to this framework, when a man is entirely predictable, when there is zero mystery, no challenge, no real emotional spark, he essentially just becomes invisible. The relationship dynamic flatlines right out of the gate because it completely lacks tension. The core takeaway they're emphasizing is that human beings are wired to value what requires actual effort. To see how the source suggests fixing this, here is our roadmap for today. First up, the flawed chasing dynamic. Next, the stoic attraction mindset. Third, creating scarcity and mystery. And finally, controlling the emotional tempo. Part 1. The flawed chasing dynamic. Let's look at why predictability fails. What's really fascinating here is how the source breaks down these predictable guy mistakes. Notice that bit about leading with a logical resume? They argue that a ton of guys try to win over a partner logically, almost like they're applying for a job, showing off how stable they are or listing their accomplishments. But the source explicitly notes, women don't chase resumes, they chase experiences. Combine that overly logical approach with constant availability and literally always saying yes to plans, and they claim you completely suffocate the emotional spark. Attraction, they argue, just isn't logical, it's emotional. Without that spark, you're just another gray face in a sea of tryhards. This is a complete flip of the typical power dynamic. On one hand, you've got guy A, right, dropping everything, chasing over texts, basically pleading for approval. But contrast that with guy B, who the source positions as the ultimate prize. He keeps his own rhythm, he protects his peace. Instead of shrinking his own life to fit perfectly into hers, he requires her to step up to be a part of his world. It's a major transition from desperation to immense self-respect. Moving to part 2, the stoic attraction mindset and mastering your emotions. Now, it's absolutely crucial to clarify the specific definition being used here. When this framework talks about stoicism, it explicitly states it does not mean being emotionally numb or just suppressing your feelings. Not at all. It's about emotional mastery. It's the ability to be the calm eye in the middle of a swirling emotional storm. It's about having a grounded presence where you can feel deeply, sure, but you don't lose yourself or react desperately to shifting moods. The source points out most men either emotionally overshare or emotionally hide. True stoicism in this specific context is all about balance and internal control. And to test this mindset, the source gives this highly specific, real-world anecdote. Imagine this bar scenario. You're out, you're talking, the conversation is flowing beautifully, but then, completely out of nowhere, she just turns cold. She gets distracted, looks away, and starts scrolling on her phone. So, how do you react? Well, this right here is exactly where the divide between anxiety and true confidence is tested. The typical anxious reaction, panic. You lean in harder, maybe you frantically try to crack a joke, you just try everything to win her attention back. But the stoic response? You just sip your drink, smile slightly, and remain completely unaffected. The source argues that genuine confidence means your internal state simply isn't shaken by a temporary shift in her mood. You hold your frame. All right, part 3, creating scarcity and mystery, the power of intrigue. So what do these actionable tactics for unpredictability actually look like? Now, the source repeatedly emphasizes these should absolutely not be manipulative games. Instead, it's just about naturally breaking predictable routines. For instance, don't text goodnight every single evening like clockwork. Give brief, satisfying answers without spilling your entire life story in the first hour of meeting. Have your own passions and goals. The whole idea is to be an unfolding mystery, creating a sense of wonder so there's always something new for her to discover about you. Let's look at how this plays out in a super common everyday scenario, the late night text. She texts you late at night. She's fully expecting the usual flirty banter, right? She's anticipating that highly predictable, eager response.
Instead, the video advises sending exactly this. Not tonight, I'm working on something important. Talk soon. Just look at that. No emojis, no lengthy explanations, no apologies. It's just polite detachment and clear direction. The framework claims that this sudden break in her rhythm is exactly what sparks intense curiosity. It gets her thinking about you simply because she couldn't predict your next move.
And this ties directly into what the source calls the framework for graduated access. The core principle here is that a man's time and attention absolutely must be earned. If you get a low-effort text, like a random "hey stranger" after weeks of silence, you don't instantly reward that with your full, excited attention. First, observe her intent. Second, read the tone and keep your responses measured. And third, make her actually earn deeper vulnerability and your valuable time. According to the source, access is a privilege, not a given. Ultimately, if you don't treat your own time as highly valuable, no one else is going to either. Which brings us to part 4, controlling the emotional tempo, pacing the tension. The source highlights this brilliant example called the coffee shop disagreement. Imagine you're on a date, grabbing coffee, and she states an opinion you genuinely disagree with. Now, most guys will just smile, nod, and play it totally safe in polite mode, but this framework says don't do that. Push back gently, challenge her a bit, ask her to explain, and then literally just let the silence hang. Let her feel the weight of being seen. The argument here is that creating this safe but challenging emotional contrast triggers attraction so much more effectively than just being a polite, robotic yes man. Because to really captivate someone's mind, you have to move past the cliches. Consider the typical dating question. What do you do for fun? It's standard, it's boring. Now compare that to a mind-seducing question. What's something you used to love as a kid that you completely stopped doing? The source notes that a question like this triggers nostalgia, deep reflection, and genuine emotion. You're engaging the mind, not just making surface-level small talk. And that brings us to a very literal, specific number mentioned in the source material, 48. Why 48? Well, the video explicitly warns against the danger of going from a first date to acting like someone's personal emotional diary in just 48 hours. When you move that fast, you aren't giving her time to feel anything. There's no space to miss you, no curiosity to build. Rushing it destroys the pacing. It leaves zero room for tension and essentially kills the chase before it can even really begin. Which honestly leads perfectly into this quote, completely encapsulating their whole philosophy. Silence is not disinterest. Silence is strategy. By slowing down the chase and actually using time and space as leverage, you allow her imagination to do the heavy lifting. The source firmly believes that giving an interaction room to breathe, commanding the tempo rather than rushing it, is the ultimate form of masculine leadership in dating. It's a wildly fascinating framework, isn't it? But as we wrap up this explainer, let's step back for a second and ask a much larger question. Are these strategies tapping into deep, fundamental human psychology, or are they simply a reflection of modern dating exhaustion, where everyone is just tired of being overly accessible and totally predictable? Whichever side you lean toward, this breakdown of stoic detachment definitely offers a really provocative lens on human relationships. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I hope it leaves you curious to explore these psychological concepts even further.